Kristen. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. So great to be with you.
Definitely good to see you again.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm just so excited to get to know you, get to know your mindfulness journey, how you got to doing what you're doing, what you love about mindfulness. As you might know, on our show, we talk about the tailored mindfulness experience so that there isn't one particular technique or way of doing things that works for everybody all the time. And it's an exploration of figuring out what works for you. So it'll be really great to hear how that went with you.
Awesome.
Yeah. So do you want to start at the beginning with what drew you to mindfulness practice? When did you start? Did you have glimpses and when you were young or
Sure.
yeah, tell us that story.
I think I started in a very typical American way. I had job stress and
Right.
needed to work on that. So it was probably, I want to say 2008, maybe around there. I
Okay.
had, a job that was very demanding, all sorts of hours, always on call, and was just really looking for some balance. And I'd been looking, back in those days, you could order DVDs online or you could order, cassette tapes. But because of my work schedule, I really didn't have much luck finding anything in person. And finally, I found through UCLA a class that was offered at 9 o'clock on Saturday mornings. And I'm like, all
Great.
right, I can do that. I can do that. And I think that it was the right fit for me at the right time because the teacher who I still sit with came in with white papers and data and science. And so even
Mm.
when I didn't feel like anything was really happening, I trusted what he was bringing. And so that kept me going until I did actually start to feel it. And then, so I sat with him every Saturday. I've been sitting with him since 2015 at this point. Um, and I lost my job in 2018 and found out, well, all of a sudden I have all this space and all this time. And so I started sitting with Diana Winston, who runs the Mindful Awareness Research Center out of UCLA. And
Mm.
because her class is on Thursday mornings at 10 o'clock, which is something you get to do if you don't have a day job.
Yeah.
And from there, I went into their intensive practice program. I did that for 2 years, and then I took their teacher training in
Okay.
2021. And so I had all this time and I was exploring, and at the same time, I found unified mindfulness. And again,
Hmm.
practical, explainable, modifiable, that system that just really, called to me. And I took their pathways training in January of 2020, and then have
Yes.
gone on and at the middle of this year finished their compass training. So that's my secular mindfulness. And in the meantime, then I've been doing, since I had the time, I did a couple year-long programs. I did a year-long program with Joanna Hardy and Mark Coleman through Spirit Rock. I've
Hmm.
been sitting for just over 2 years now with Michael Taft out of Oakland. We have it's a
Oh,
small
yeah.
of us, about 12, but we meet every week. And I just finished a year-long program, the second of one I've done with Ethan Nichtern out of New York.
Beautiful. So great. And I love how you mentioned that at the beginning, you didn't feel it and you
Hmm.
had to trust it. Could you tell
Exactly.
us a little bit more about that? Like what were you experiencing and where was the trust? How did that work in with keeping you going?
Well, I think I had, even though I'd been dabbling online with DVDs, I still had this stereotypical misconception, right? That my thoughts would slow and I'll be less reactive and everything would be, calmer and more peaceful. And that was not happening. And,
Mm.
as you know, that may never happen, right? We don't change our thoughts. We change our reactions to our thoughts. And so I just had that mistake. And it took a while for me to understand that that wasn't going to happen, but that doesn't mean that I don't get benefits out of it and that things can't get better. So, he would bring in the fMRIs and the research papers. And so little by little, I would start noticing what had changed, that I didn't
Hmm.
hang on to those negative thoughts so much, that my immediate thought was still would be the negative one, but right away I could backpedal and go, okay, but, and maybe,
Yes.
hang on, before going all the way down that rabbit hole of that awful story that may or may not be true. So it probably took, it was probably my third 6-week session, 6-week class series with him that I'm finally like, oh, right. I was looking for this and missing that. I wasn't getting that, but I was getting this, and this was just as valuable.
Right. So we all come in with certain expectations, I guess, in terms of what it's going to be like, and then it is or it isn't.
Exactly.
And so you trust it. Yeah, go ahead.
And then having to be open-minded and seeing the value in what it is, even if it wasn't, letting go of the idea of what you thought it was or wanted it to be, and being open to seeing what it actually is and how useful that really is.
Right. And that slowly things are shifting, but they're just slow.
I
like the image that comes to mind is, there's a person and there's a hole on the street and they keep walking into the hole, and then they're like, oh, let's go around. And then maybe you trip, you get in, and then eventually you go around it, but the hole's there, right?
Exactly. The hole's there, but I can see it and I can avoid it now. Usually.
Yes.
Not always. It's not magic. Not always.
Yes.
But usually.
It's true. And what techniques were you practicing at that time?
That was really straightforward mindfulness. So essentially Vipassana. Mostly shamatha, following the breath, calming, and then concentration. What I really liked with my teacher, Brian, is he did teach us a lot of concentration. So inverse counting, body scans in different patterns. So you got both the benefit of the body scan, but also a tighter concentration window to keep track of where you were going. And so for a long time, inverse counting really was my go-to, 21, 19, 2, 8. That was a real, a very easy way for me to keep track of when I was actually concentrating. Because when I was doing just straight counting, I'm really good at math. And I realized, I can go off in thought between the numbers and come back and not miss anything. So it's like, I'm getting really good at this. And then I realized, no, I'm doing really poorly at that. That's not how that's supposed to go.
Yeah, that's interesting about the different levels of thought, right? That you kind of think you're focusing on something, but then you could be doing something else without noticing. And then there's different things. I had that when I started doing Vipassana also, which is insight meditation, and it was body scan as well. And I thought I had no thoughts. I'm like, this is great. Meantime, I'm like, how's this sensation? And how's that sensation? And I'm thinking about the thing. Yes. And I'm like, I have no thoughts.
No, not at all.
And then I'm like, why am I so tight? And it's like, because I'm controlling the whole experience.
Exactly. And that's
so you got to zoom out and you see, there's more thoughts.
Meditators, it's a common thought to think, I'm getting worse because I'm having all these thoughts.
Yeah.
So you have to remind, no, you're getting better because you're noticing the thoughts were always there, right? Yes. You're noticing them there. But it takes a minute because we're so used to it just automatically going that we don't pay attention.
So true. So true. And then, so in terms of the benefits you received at that time, you talked about that you had a little bit more perspective and more space. Is there anything else that you got in those beginning days?
It was really the space. As I said, my job was very hectic and very active. And so the mindfulness helped me not get caught up in the swirl and the energy and the anxiety that would come. I actually, even before knowing unified mindfulness, was doing my own version of micro hits. In that, the only excuse I had to get away from my desk was to go make my tea. So when I make my tea, I'm going to sit there, and as the water's boiling, I'm just going to be here. This is when one thing we've lost with now that thankfully most people aren't smoking anymore. We've lost that 10-minute break that we get, that nobody questions. And so it was really I was able to not carry the energy from a previous encounter into the next encounter. So if you had a stressful meeting, I was able to let go of that and go into the new meeting fresh and open, rather than taking the anxiety and the agita from that into this. And then by the end of the day, just being so worn down, it coming into every new thing with like a fresh palette then made me more responsive to what was actually happening in real time, more open to what was actually going on. And again, left me then with space to have clearer perspective rather than coming in with my preconceived story that came from my energy, which came from something that had happened that had nothing to do with the interaction I was presently having.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, that's so great. And did you find you enjoyed your job more as a result? Or were you always enjoying it? You just felt burnt out or?
At that time, I really actually enjoyed it. I am one of those people, for better or worse, who really does lean into things. So, I have to say a lot of that anxiety and agita was self-created from me bringing it in there. But again, then seeing that's not really useful, that's not really helpful. But it gave me, I didn't feel like beat up at the end of the day. I was still tired, but I wasn't like, I didn't feel like I'd been through a fight.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think that could help so many people because I think a lot of us feel very pressured. There's so much to do all the time, right? It doesn't end. And then we think if we just get to the end of the to-do list, then we can rest. But then there is no end of the to-do list.
Ever. No, I had a to-do list of all my to-do lists. It's like, no, it's never going to stop.
Totally. And could you tell us a bit more about that period where you lost your job? Like that must have been really destabilizing. And how were you practicing at that time? And how did the practice help? Or did it help?
Yeah, it was destabilizing because at that point I'd been in that job or some version of the job for 20 years. And I had always hoped, to transition into something lighter and smaller, but not for a few years out. So it was one of those things that even though you see it coming, it's still a surprise when it actually happens. And so it was destabilizing. I was definitely practicing at that time. And I was still practicing with Brian on Saturdays and had a good Sangha there. But then it gave me space to explore other things. And that's when I started sitting in the more traditional Buddhist styles. Because our wonderful teacher, Mary Stankovich, was teaching, as it turns out, just 3/4 of a mile down the street from here on Thursday nights. And all of a sudden, I can go on Thursday nights now since I don't have a job. And so I sat with her up until from 2018, beginning of 2019, up until we had to close for the pandemic. And then that is really when I dove into it. And it was, it was two purposes. It was number one, I needed something to do. I was used to working 60, 70 hours a week. All of a sudden you have all this time and it sounds like, oh, what a relief, how awesome that was. And I'm not the kind of person for whom that is. I need direction. And so the practice helped in two ways. Number one, the practice itself helped. And number two, the community and the direction the learning gave me was also really, really helpful.
So great. And also that you saw the opportunity that I have space. So what can I do? Right. Because you could also kind of spiral into just getting crazy about looking for another job. Right. Which is what it's like, well, I don't have time because I got to look for another job. But you actually took the opportunity.
It was a point where, and a few things. There was a point where the two companies that kept coming back to me were companies that I wasn't going to work for. And so I decided to take a break from looking for work just because I was totally burned out at that point. And then of course, through 2019, I was, giving myself a break, diving into these year-long programs, and then the pandemic hit. So there were a couple things that all of a sudden kind of came at the same time. But no, to your point, I used to joke, it's either do this or day drink, and so let me take one more class. Yep. Let me take one more and see how that goes.
That's amazing. And did your practice change along the way, or are you still doing, the shamatha and vipassana, or did you ever find, I need something new or something different?
Yeah, it's changed quite a bit now. In my primary practice is really most of what I've been doing with Michael Taft is much more of a a Dochen or Mahamudra, open awareness type practice, the non-meditation meditation type. And so a lot more open, a different way of approaching concentration and just seeing emptiness and, noticing emptiness and noticing form and having that space and bringing that into your life.
Mm-hmm. And so have you always had teachers along the way? Like it went from Brian and now with Michael, like do you find that helpful to always have a teacher available?
Very, very much so. Very much so. There is part of it, the accountability, right? It's nice to have somebody that you're checking in with, that you feel responsible to, that's putting in the effort. It's nice to have somebody to answer questions. And it's one of those things that, and this doesn't just apply to meditation thing, in all aspects of life. Most of the time we know what to do, but it's better when you hear it from someone else. Yes. Right? So even though I am a meditation teacher, I go to Michael. He doesn't tell me anything, not always, but generally when it's something simple, he's not telling me what I don't know. I do know it. And if you came to me with the same question, I would know what to tell you and I would be able to run you through it. But having that reflection that, what you're not noticing and what you're not seeing, and just that breadth of experience, it's always good to be reassured. No, this isn't new. Most people's practice goes through phases like this. This is common. This is, we can make this work. So it really is nice to have, and now too, at this point, I have that as much with Sangha. Because I know at this point, most of the people in my friends are meditators. So there is something to be said for, being able to have a conversation and then just pointing out something subtle that you're just overlooking. So it's always, for me, it's been invaluable to have people to check in with.
Yeah. Yeah. I know Shinzen talks about the 4 pillars of support, right? Like the give support, get support, retreat, and daily practice, right? Or is it formal? There's formal and there's retreat and daily practice, and then there's informal. How do you want to tell us about the pillars? You know them better than I do.
Practice. Yes, practice in daily life, which is formal and informal.
Right. And retreat is a separate pillar.
Exactly.
And then there's get support and give support. Do you want to tell us a bit what those look like in your life?
Those, yeah. My practice in daily life is my main practice. I am a big proponent still of the micro hits and the background practice, though, at one point I was in 4 or 5 classes. So I was having formal sitting practice 4 or 5 times a day, 4 to 5 times a week, just because I was in class and doing that. I do still try, I do still sit. I try to sit a formal sit in the morning. And then I do try to do something in motion or something in movement in the evening if I can get outside and be out in nature and just be open and expansive. The retreat practice, the plus and minuses again of the pandemic, that being able to sit with all these teachers and, retreating from home is a different animal, but, the bed's comfy, the shower's warm, the food is good, but it is not quite the same as going to retreat. I've had a couple opportunities, once this past year and once the year before, that what I've done is rented a cabin with some friends. Mm-hmm. And one of them, there was an online retreat that we did together out in Big Bear. And then this past year, actually, my Compass study group and I rented an Airbnb outside of Denver and just created our own retreat, pulled up some Dharma talks and some teachings, and then scheduled our own thing. And so that was kind of like the best of both worlds, because we were free enough to make it what we wanted, but we still had the container and the structure, and we were there, each of us with 3 other teachers. So there was definitely the support there. And the give support, get support, for me, most of that is the same coin. I still meet with my Pathway study group once a month. I still meet with my Compass study group once a month. I'm still in touch with my study group from the UCLA program at TMF. I have a group of women who I sit with Brian, and we meet once a month. And so it's just become, ingrained in my life, in that it's it's not a concerted effort. The giving support, the
Right.
getting support is just ingrained in how I interact with my friends.
Yeah, so it sounds like over the years, it's just become, but your life has kind of become, it's all become part of the meditation in a way, right? Or
Exactly. And that's it,
yeah, the
exactly. And that's,
meditate, yeah, it's beautiful.
well, and that's the point, right? It's not that I don't meditate to become a better meditator, but that's incidental, right? You meditate to become a better at life. And so the
Yes.
more it's naturally interwoven with everything, the easier it is to stay on track for me.
Yeah, for sure. And do you find you came to it from, a stress perspective? So do you find it's helped in that and what you were looking for? Are you better able to deal with stress?
I think so, though it is at this stage of the game where we are in the world, sometimes I wonder, well, is it equanimity or is it isolation, right? Am I less annoyed just because I don't have to interact quite so much with people I'm choosing not to interact with? Is it just that I've
Which
been up on
maybe
my
comes from practice too, right? Like that discernment around where do we spend our time?
that is
Right?
true.
Because I've
That is
noticed
true,
that too, that, each day it's like, okay, well, I have this event.
right?
I could go,
Or I could
but
not.
I could
Exactly.
not.
Yes,
I
and
have
that
choice.
that really is, this time of year, for me, it's always a natural kind of purging
Mm,
process. It comes back from when I had that job that, finally the 2 weeks at the end of the year, 1 week you spend with the holidays with family, and then I would have a week to go. It's like, okay, how am I on 157 email lists? Why am I recording, all these TV shows? Why do I have to listen to the 15-minute daily update podcasts? And to your point, the discernment. Now,
hmm.
things I accumulate very easily things over, and the shoulds, and this is the type of person I want to be, or this is the type of person I think I should be, or, well, clearly this
Yes.
is up. I want to be intelligent and informed. This is something I should be doing. And having the discernment to sit down and go, well, how much of that is just affect and how much of that is
Yeah.
serving?
Yes.
And so it is, and part of it too, I think, is also just getting older, that the shoulds diminish. I'm finding it's like, yeah, 5 years ago I would have been mortified to hear myself say no to that. Now I'm like, yeah, no, no, sorry, not doing it.
Yeah, so good. It's so good that it's um, over time we can learn to know what we enjoy, what's serving us, right? Because even the things we enjoy, like you say, I'm also like I love to learn a lot and do a lot, but even on my hobbies or the things that I love, then it's like it's too much. It's too many
Exactly.
things. So
Exactly.
so being discerning and taking out, and it's almost honing in of all these things I love, like what do I want to
Yes.
focus on right now,
Yes.
or what do I most need? Do I need space? Do I need what do we need in our lives, right?
Mhm.
So
Well, and also the knowing at different points it would be different.
yes.
That there are times where, because of timing or because of situations, no, I really do need to kind of dig in, maybe be a little bit overwhelmed right now. And then there are times where, right now I just need the space. I need this one thing to be my focus and that one thing only, and let everything else kind of go.
Yeah, yeah. And that connects also to when you're choosing a meditation technique, right? Because
Yes.
depending on what's going on in your life, sometimes you might need to calm your system, sometimes you might need to notice what's going on. How do you decide? Like do you keep one technique for a period of time, or do you check day by day?
I I kind of, let's see, that's interesting. I used to do like a cycle for a long time that was really serving me, in that I would just be focusing on the breath, and then I would do inverse counting. So I would be settle, and then I would concentrate, and then I would go into open awareness, and then I would do metta. And that was a
Mm.
really nice flow for me. And then it just stopped working. All of a sudden it was like
Huh.
I couldn't settle, or I didn't, and again, it stopped working. Not to judge a meditation, but sometimes it doesn't work. And so
Mm.
I am now, I my primary practice is now the open awareness and just seeing awake awareness everywhere and the emptiness. But the sits always start with the shamatha. And when I'm off, it's a lot more ritualistic. Again, after the pandemic and taking all those classes, half my meditations are done on the couch. And so it's just like every once in a while, it's like, no, I can't be. It does need to be. I'll go and I pull out my bench and I sit down and I set an intention and then I set the timer and just formalize it to bring it back in. I mean, to your point, sometimes really wide and scattered and really need to focus on the concentration first to get settled. And sometimes, the openness is just available. And there's value in pushing through when things are difficult, and there's value in just switching to something else intentionally. But again, back to your point about the discernment. Usually when I sit, I have an intention, but probably 1 out of 10 times my mind is like, yeah, no, not that one today.
Yeah. And do you set an intention for the sit, or is it more like for your day, for what you'd like?
It's
for
more
yourself?
It's for my practice in general.
Okay.
It's more what I want out of practice in general, and this particular sit is in service of that. Because for me, to set an intention just for that sit then disconnects that sit from everything else. And for me, my goal is to have the awareness be in everything I do. So the intention is for my practice. This sit is in service of my practice in general. So my intention is for my practice in general.
Yeah. And is there an example of an intention that you've been using lately?
The one is this time of year is just to be kind and open and present. It's people are struggling right now.
Yeah.
Struggling. I have had since Thanksgiving 3 people break down crying just in conversations we were having, just from the accumulated stress and pressure. And to just be kind and open and present with that, because that's something it would be very easy to close off and back away from. And so, to me right now, the point of my practice is to have the capacity to be there when people are going through that, and not get drawn into it myself, not get overwhelmed myself, but also not go running the other way, to just be with it, knowing I can't probably fix it. I can't change it, but I can help them process just by being there, let them go through what they're going through.
Yeah, I love that. I share that with you, this idea of just being open. And sometimes for, you're an achiever like me, it feels like, really? Like, that's it? Like, shouldn't I have these bigger goals in terms of like doing things in the world? But then you think like, wouldn't the world be better if we could all just be open and kind? So maybe that's the work, right? Like the root cause of a lot of these problems that we're trying to fix.
Well, and to your point, it would feel better, I'm guessing for you, but it would definitely feel better for me to, okay, well, let me do something then and make that better for you. That would be the easier move, right? Let me, okay, you got to figure this out. Well, I'll call that company and I'll get the answer on that. And that would be easier for me, but not necessarily what needs to happen. And so, the being, okay, nope, I can sit here and be with my discomfort and not put that back in a way that's not serving the person I'm with. Yeah.
Beautiful. And what about with your students? What are you teaching? What do you find they struggle with?
Right now, again, it really is overwhelmed. People are just overwhelmed. And so I'm teaching, for me, the magic of unified mindfulness and the secret sauce really is the practice in daily life. And so that tends to be what I like to lean into, in that, just as we were talking about, learning to find the discernment of what's really important to you and listen to that and be open and aware for where those little bits of insight show up. So it really is basic mindfulness 101, the stress reduction and the remembering. The remembering. Let's make a plan. Let's make a plan for when you feel like this, what can you do? When you know this thing is coming up, how can you prepare for it? When something like that has happened, how can you reset? And how can you find little moments in your day to just build up those baseline skills so that when you have something, reacting with the skills becomes the default.
Yes. Yeah, that's so good. The reminders and the support. Because I remember from my days when I was stressed out and overworked, I felt so alone, right?
Yes.
Because you think everybody else has got it all together,
Yep.
and
Yep.
it's just me that's struggling.
Exactly. No, and what's the same as
Yeah.
on retreat, right? You're like, I have not like followed 3 breaths in a row, and everybody else here is enlightened and a Buddha, and I'm the only one who's not, right? Just like, no, everybody's got their own version of what you've got going on. So
Yeah.
it's the normalizing it. Nope, that's how the mind
Yes.
works. Nope, that's how life is right now. Nope, you're perfectly okay. We're gonna make it through it.
Yeah. It's very freeing to
Yes.
allow ourselves to be imperfect, I guess.
That
A
absolutely,
process.
absolutely, and just so counterculture, unfortunately,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
it's
But I
tough.
though, I mean, again, with the state of the world, I think people are realizing more. So hopefully, that won't be as much of a pressure for a lot of people going forward, right? It's better to be real than be perfect.
Yeah, yeah, and I think people are realizing it. I think that's one of the silver linings of the pandemic that, the way we were doing things for a lot of people, it's like, well, that is not really sustainable.
Right.
Like there must be another way, and there is
Exactly.
another way.
We've been doing things because that's how we always did them. So every
Yes.
once in a while, we stop and think, is that still the best way to do it? It's like, no, that's the road I take to work. Well, they've built this brand new freeway. Maybe you should take the freeway instead of, and that's it. Just the thinking about it instead of just being on autopilot.
Yes. Yes. So great. So great. Anything else you want to share with us? Anything else about your journey, about mindfulness?
I think my journey is, well, up until till the point where I lost my job and started taking 6 classes at once. I think before that, my mindfulness journey was very, very predictable and very standard in that, it was fits and starts and tried this and it didn't work. And then I came back to something different. And it's just keep trying.
Yeah.
Mindfulness is huge. Meditation is ginormous. There will be a technique that will work for you. There will be a style that will work for you. And just keep trying. The benefits are more and more proven.
Hmm.
The science is coming out more and more every day. And it's not magic, but it does work.
Yes. Beautiful. And do you want to share with us maybe a micro hit of your favorite practice that we can do together?
Absolutely. Absolutely. My go-to is always flow. It was when we tried to do feel rest, I was just devastated because I'm like, how can we possibly, everything is moving all the time. What are they talking about? And I was just so excited when 2 weeks later, I say, oh no, we have a technique for that too. So let's do that. Go
Perfect.
ahead, get yourself in a comfortable position. You want to be upright, but not stiff. Tilt your chin down just a little bit so your neck opens up. Your next exhalation, let your shoulders drop if you can. Gently sweep your attention from your head down through your body. Release any tension you might find gently. If it won't release, just let it be. Go ahead and let your attention freely float. See if somewhere in your physical body or in your emotional sense, you find some movement. If you do, let your attention land, sink into it, and label that flow. And you're not looking for anything spectacular. It can be very subtle, building your sensory clarity, or buzzing, popping, tingling, releasing. And as you find yourself settled, maybe you've relaxed a little more. Releasing that can be flow. Sensation fades. It's great. Just let your attention float again. Find another spot. Sink into it. It's comfortable for you. You can always use your breath. Inhale and exhale. Chest rising and falling. Your stomach expanding and contracting. Just flow. If it works for you, see if you can expand your attention out. Encompass your entire body. You notice any movement, any energy, a sense of being alive. And sort of transition our attention back to our shared space. See if you can bring any benefit from this short little meditation with you and carry it through the rest of your day. So when you're comfortable, open your eyes if they've been closed. Give yourself a little shake. And return your attention to our shared space. Thank you.
So lovely, Kristen.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No, this has been fun.
So great to be with you. Yeah. So where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you're doing?
The URL is thebackroadjourney.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. And yeah, I'm looking forward to connecting again soon.
I hope so, Paula. So great to see you. Thank you so much. It's great fun.
Thank you.